Welcome, everyone. Looks like we've got a fairly big group here for PowerTeacher Pro, secondary level, grade 7 to 12. So thank you for taking some time this afternoon to spend it with me to look at PowerTeacher Pro. I do have PowerPoint, and I do have a website that with a sandbox account that we'll be looking at and going through some different features of PowerTeacher Pro, at least what we can do within an hour. So if you do have any questions, Chad is moderating and will let me know if there's anything that comes up. So even though I do have an agenda set for this presentation, it's not an issue to kind of stop and address any questions or delve deeper into any specifics that that you guys may have some particular interest in. So this was set up to be like a beginner or foundational basic PowerTeacher Pro presentation. So I'm just want to get a perhaps some information if you're able to put it in the chat. Is everyone here new to PowerTeacher Pro, or do we have some teachers who are already familiar with it and perhaps have been using it? I will be going through some basic features of PowerTeacher Pro. So I certainly don't want to make it something that's not useful for everyone, but hopefully most of you are fairly new to PowerTeacher Pro. And I'm seeing a few comments here, so looks like we're just okay. Just for term 2. All right, perfect. So I see a few things in there. My name, just to quickly introduce myself to you, my name's Brian Doucette. I work with Department of Education and Early Childhood Development. I've been with the ECD for about 3.5 years as the in-school educational lead, so just involved with anything and lots of projects involving PowerSchool and TiNet. And certainly PowerTeacher Pro is one of those big projects that we've been pushing for the past 2 years. We've had many schools, many teachers already migrated over to Pro. And in this 3rd year, we'll have the last set of teachers jumping from the old gradebook to the new PowerTeacher Pro. So by June 2021, that is the expected completion timeline for when all teachers will be on Pro. All right, so thank you for that information in the chat. That's helpful. And Chad is here to let me know of any questions that come up. So I guess we'll get started. The presentation, the PowerPoint, I did early this afternoon, drop it into the slide deck, so you will find it there. And let me just make this full screen. All right. And I also have some additional resource files. I have this bit.ly link here at the bottom, bit.ly/SLA_PTP2020. So you'll find some additional resources there as well. And there's also a slide towards the end where I'll direct you to some additional resources if you're looking to learn more about PowerTeacher Pro following this session. So what we plan to cover over the next hour is just an introduction and overview to PowerTeacher Pro, looking at some of the setup features within Pro, working with categories and assignments, and traditional grades calculations as well, because hopefully all the teachers here are secondary teachers. So when we're reporting for the report cards, we're dealing with percentage grades, and depending how you're using PT Pro or how you would have been using Gradebook, you may be familiar with final grade setup, which is called traditional grades calculations in PowerTeacher Pro, looking at scoring assignments. And then, there's some resources that I can point you to if you need to go off and learn some more about Pro on your own. So just getting started, some key points, basically how to navigate to Pro. from your PowerTeacher account. I'm looking at some basic setup configurations that you can set for your individual PT Pro gradebook. Then we'll spend a lot of time working with assignments, whether that's with categories, creating assignments, traditional grades calculations. So we'll try to spend a lot of time there. Hopefully I won't go too quickly, but if you need me to repeat anything, or if you have questions that cover something that I haven't got, just let me know. And then scoring assignments. So that's the layout for the next hour. So just getting started with the overview. I'm just going to minimize my PowerPoint, and I'm going to jump to my PowerTeacher login page. So I didn't really ask, you guys that are participating in this session, if you're classroom teachers, if you've already been using Gradebook, if you've already familiar with PowerTeacher. But I would imagine most of you are familiar with this login page. So I'm just going to sign in under this. This is a sandbox account on one of our dev servers. And I'll just let you know that all the information on this server is, well, I don't even want to say scrambled, because the information is not scrambled. It's been re-imported with fictitious names. So when you see student names, when you see teacher names, it's all fictitious names that I've just randomly imported into the system. So there's no personal identifiable information as we're going through, this presentation. So when you log into PowerTeacher, you're probably accustomed to some of the features here with taking attendance, and perhaps in the past on the side menu bar here, you would be used to launching Gradebook. Once your sections are switched over from Gradebook to PowerTeacher Pro, you will see a PowerTeacher Pro link below each of those sections, which have been migrated to Pro. So you can launch Pro by clicking under any one of these sections. You also have a PT Pro link here on the left, and you can also launch Pro from this left navigation link as well. Not sure what your school plan is for the upcoming school year. If you haven't yet migrated over to Pro, you may want to check with your administrator as to when that timeline is. Some schools may be moving to Pro right away in September. Some of them may be later on. I'm not exactly sure what your regional PD plan is or migration plan is, but you can certainly follow up with your administrative team at your school to find out when you'll be moving over to Pro, or perhaps if you're after this session you kind of get a sense that, well, this doesn't look too bad, and maybe check out some of the resources on your own before the school startup year. Perhaps there's a way for you to perhaps get switched over to Pro even before maybe the rest of your school or other staff are ready to do so. But again, that would be a discussion to have with your administration. So I'm just going to click on, let me just go switch my school here. I'm attached to a few different schools in order to have some different assignments. I'm going to click on the sign. So first thing you'll notice, if you haven't seen Pro, if you haven't launched it before, is that it opens right up in your web browser. So this is great because with the old Gradebook, you had to rely on Java. So it was very limited to the types of devices that you could use Gradebook on. It was, your desktops and laptops, and that was basically it. But since Pro is web-based, you can run it on a Mac, PC, desktop, laptop. You can run it on a Chromebook, so that's not an issue to run it on a Chromebook. You can run it on an iPad, Android tablet, and even your mobile devices, even though it's a small screen, but you can certainly access PowerTeacher Pro through a mobile device. Now, when my Pro opens up, these are sections for the last school year for 1920. So you will see that I've got some data already collected and tracked for some of these sections. And when you first launch Pro, it always opens up your assignment list page. So this is the default page that will open. And you can see for the Science 8 class, some different assessments that I've created. You can see the category to which they're attached. You can see if I've scored these assignments and how many have been scored. You can see the due date and points possible. And then at the end, this edit button allows me to edit the assignment if I want to change the name, or if I want to change the due date or change the point value or whatever I may want to do. We'll look at that a bit more closely a bit later on.
Brian, we do have a question.
Okay.
It says, if I'm staying in the same school that is already using PowerTeacher Pro, will new courses for September already be accessible?
The new courses be accessible in Pro? Yeah, that would be a technical thing that would happen, because by default, all the sections are gradebook sections. But whether through your PowerSchool, your regional PowerSchool manager, or through your school administration, they can change those sections from gradebook to Pro. So if your school is Pro, I would suspect that they would be set up as PT Pro sections right from the get-go in September. If that answers, I hope that was addressing the question properly, but just let me know if it doesn't.
Nope, that does, Brian. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Chad. So within PT Pro, we'll get to look at some of these different icons and links and whatnot, but certainly these are things that you can explore in the fall or whenever the time is that you do migrate over to PT Pro. So right now I'm in my Science 8 class, and you can see it up here in the top center of my browser. The 81, that just happens to be the section number. All sections or all classes are assigned a section number, and you're probably familiar with that, even within PowerTeacher and taking attendance and the old gradebook. The school year and the TLS is just the acronym for the school for this particular class. Now this button, this light blue button, is known as the Class Selector, and if I click on the Class Selector, I get a drop-down window, and you can see all the other different types of sections that I'm teaching. Because this is a sandbox account, I have some elementary sections at an elementary school. I have some high school, senior high sections at Sydney Academy, and then I have some junior high sections at T.A. Sullivan School as well. So I'm sure your gradebook or your teaching assignment won't be as lengthy and as numerous as this one, but it just allows me to access a bunch of different sections depending what my need is. So if I want to switch from science to English, it's I click on the Class Selector and I just click on it, and this will open up my ELA 9, and you can see that I've got some assignments entered for this section as well. So just to show you some basic setup things that I can do that you can configure within your individual gradebook. You'll notice here that I have two sections of English Language Arts 7. One is section 74, the other is section 75. And that may not mean a whole lot to me. If I'm looking for one of my sections, because in secondary, teachers, depending on your school and your situation, teachers will teach multiple sections of the same course. So what you can do to help more easily identify one class from the other is that you can give your courses a custom name. The names that appear here are the default names within PowerSchool. So what I can do is I can go to Settings and Class Descriptions. And you'll see here under English Language Arts 7, you'll see this area here where I can enter a custom class name. Perhaps I just want to abbreviate it, which I can certainly do. Whoops. ELA, I can make it ELA 7. Since I have 2 sections of ELA 7, perhaps this section belongs to my homeroom students, so I'm going to just put Doucette at the end to tag it, and I can expand this box here for this other section of English Language Arts 7, and say this class belongs to homeroom Smith. And then I'm just going to hit save. And you'll notice right away, as soon as I hit save, you'll notice in my class selector that I can see my custom name now. So instead of English Language Arts 7, I see ELA 7 Doucette, ELA 7 Smith. And, film and video production, if I want to shorten that, where is that course? I could just put the acronym if I want to just simplify it. So you can make whatever name you want, however you want to organize it. And this is strictly for your individual gradebook. It doesn't change anything within PowerSchool admin. So, the student timetables will still display English Language Arts 7. Report cards will still have English Language Arts 7. This doesn't affect any other parts of the system. It's just internal to your own gradebook. So it's kind of like for your eyes only. Even on the student parent portal, they'll see English Language Arts 7. They won't see the ELA 7 Doucette. So it's just a way to help yourself better organize your gradebook. While we're here on the class descriptions, something else you can do is you can add a description for the course. I think I have one here for Science 8. So this is one that I already have entered. So, excuse me. So what you can do is, if you have a course outline, your syllabus, whatever you happen to call it, in a document format, you can copy the text from that document and you can paste it directly into here. That's one way to add a class description for your different sections. Something else you can do is you can add a link. So if you had your course outline as a Google document, you could provide the Google Share link embedded in your class description, and that way, instead of just having the text in this class description, you could have the link to the actual document. Perhaps you have images, embedded in the document. You can't really work too well with images in here. So you may find, if you want to do some more complex formatting, that linking to a document would be better served as opposed to just having the text pasted in this box. You could also link to your teacher website. If you had your course outline there, you could link to that as well. The one thing you cannot do, though, is you cannot attach attachments. So if you had your course outline as a document or a PDF, you would not be able to link. You wouldn't be able to attach a document. But I suppose if you had the PDF in your Google Drive, then you could link to that document. So these are just some of the things that you can do on the settings class description page. Is just assign custom names and add some details about the different courses that you're teaching. And the purpose for adding a class description would be to help better inform the students and parents who are visiting your class on the student parent portal. So putting that information would be for their benefit, to be able to provide them with that additional information. So just jumping back to the PowerPoint, we've got navigating the class selector. Yeah, we'll do some more exploring in the gradebook as we go through. setting up PT Pro. So we just talked about viewing and adding class descriptions and setting up custom names. Data migration, just to speak to this quickly, depending on the time of year that you migrate to Pro from Gradebook, there may be a migration of the existing data that you've already entered in Gradebook. So if you're starting in Pro right away fresh with a clean slate in September, there's no migration to worry about, because since nothing's been entered, there's nothing to transfer from Gradebook to Pro. But if you're starting off the school year still with using Gradebook, and you're entering assessments and perhaps even done the Q1 report cards in November and only migrating to Pro later on in the school year, when the point comes that you do migrate, there will be an intermediary stage or step where all the information in Gradebook gets moved over to Pro. So all the work that you've entered into Gradebook, it's not lost. If you're just migrating partway through the year, all that information gets moved over automatically to Pro, including all your categories as well. Okay, are there any questions before we look at working with assignments, creating categories, and grade setup? All right. So let's see here. So let's go back to Science 8. And go to my assignment list. All right, so for this class, we already have some assignments entered, and you'll notice that they are attached to a category. So let's just take a look at the categories that I have in my PowerTeacher Pro gradebook. So I'm going to click on grading, click on categories, and you'll see a fairly lengthy list, I guess, of categories. And here's the ones that I have assigned for Science 8. So there's 4 units. You see cells, tissues, and organs. You see life science fluids, life science optics, and earth and space. So these are units of study that are specific to the Science 8 curriculum. So what I've done is I've created categories that align to those units of study. And you'll see that I've got some other categories that are based on the strands in English language arts. And I have some math strand categories as well. And then you'll also notice that I have some more, I guess, what can be referred to as traditional types of categories. That's how I had organized my assessments. Back when I was teaching, I had tests and exam and quizzes and assignments, and you see those here. What the province is trying to recommend now is that when we're creating categories for your gradebook, is that you look at your units of study, look at your strands, and kind of organize your assessments based on those concepts as opposed to assessment types. Because when you're looking at something like a test or an assignment or a project, it's an assessment type, but we really want to move towards organizing our categories towards the units of study or the concepts that are within those curriculum outcomes. So this category, this test one, perhaps it's one that I no longer am using. One of the nice things you can do is in Pro is that you can hide your categories. You cannot delete them if they've been used, even if it's in a previous year. If the category is attached to an assessment, you won't be able to delete it. But if it's something that you're no longer using, or perhaps you had a change in assignments and you used to teach math and you no longer teach math, so you don't want to see those categories, you can make them inactive so they're hidden from view. So if I want to make tests hidden, I just click on the edit button here on the right, and you see this pop-up window, and I'm just going to make it inactive, and I'm going to hit save. And what you'll notice is that the test category is gone from my view, so it just helps keep things more concise and less cluttered. I know in the old gradebook, you could have dozens and dozens of categories, and you couldn't delete them, and teachers would kind of sort them by putting a Z hyphen to kind of drop them to the very bottom of the list. But you don't, you can avoid that workaround, I guess, because they do have a nice solution in PT Pro. And if you do need, for some reason, to see your inactive categories, you just click here in the checkbox, Show Inactive. And then at the bottom, actually, I have quite a few of them. This column here indicates whether it's active or not. So all of these categories which have no checkbox are all different types of categories which are inactive. So you can see how much longer my list is, but luckily I'm able to make some of these categories inactive if I no longer need them. And if you do need them, I can just click on test on the pencil icon, just click on active, and it makes it active again in my list. If you want to create a category, you just click on the create button up here. Wherever you navigate within PT Pro, this menu bar along the top is always going to appear regardless of what page you're on. So to create an assignment or category is very simple because this create button will always be there. I'm going to just click on create a category. And one of the nice things you can do in Pro is that in the old gradebook, a category was assigned to your gradebook, and the category would appear in all your sections. If it was a math strand, you'd see those math strands in English or in social studies and science and all the courses. One of the nice things about Pro is that I can be very specific as to where I want to apply my categories. So I'm going to create a strand as a category for Math 8. And this is going to be data management. And you can see that I've limited it only to Math 8, Section 81, Section 82. I can give it a color. I can put a description under here if I want to provide more information to to parents about what data management covers in grade 8 math. And I'm just going to hit save. So you'll see this category is added to the bottom. So that's how easy it is to create a category. You'll notice that I have a couple strands up here. So if I wanted to move my data management up the list, you just click on these arrows to reorder them. And you basically just, it can be a bit tedious if you have a long list, but it's kind of nice to have your categories organized. There we go. So I'll just pop it right there. So I have my strands kind of clustered together. I have my English categories clustered together. Likewise, my science ones are all together as well. So trying to just better organize my categories. So the nice thing is that with this category that I just created, since it's limited to only Math 8, when I'm creating an assignment in a different course, whether it's science, social studies, film and video 12, I'm not going to see data management when I expand my drop-down list of my categories. Because data management only applies to Math 8, when I'm creating assignments in all my different sections, I'm not going to see data management in in those other courses only for Math 8. So it helps keep things very nice and tidy for sure. Just let me know if there's any questions. If not, I will, keep on going. So that's how you add categories and edit. You can edit them as well, like I had said, if you need to revise any of your existing categories, and certainly make use of, connecting them, only to the courses to which they apply, so that it helps keep your gradebook nice and clean as well when you're creating assignments. So that's certainly very critical when you're using Pro and Secondary is taking some time to reflect on how you want to organize your gradebook, and be thoughtful of what you're going to use for categories. And like I said, if you're teaching math, junior high math and English, you may want to look at the strands. If you're teaching other courses, you may want to look at the units of study for those courses and set up your categories, kind of similar like I did for my Science 8, as you can see here. And just try to get away from using assessment types, like getting away from test, quiz, and project and assignment. The one category you could use that's an assessment type could be an exam, because depending on your school, you may have a certain percentage of the final grade which is allocated to the exam. So you may want to have an exam category, but there's multiple ways of achieving that through your final grade setup, which I guess we'll look at right now. So another important configuration setup for secondary teachers is your traditional grades calculations. So under settings, I'm going to click on traditional grades calculations, and you'll see that this is for Science 8. And again, this is a sandbox, so I've just got different things going on here. But this is similar for those of you who have been using Gradebook. This is, the same function as final grade setup in the old Gradebook. So you're going to set up however you want your percentage points to calculate, whether it's total points, term weighting. You can use outcomes weighting and category weighting. So they're very similar to what you have in Gradebook. And if I choose category weighting, I can, now you'll notice I have some other categories here which are tagged to Science 8. And again, that's just due to the fact that it's a sandbox, and I have some categories that are linked to different sections that, really ideally I wouldn't have links. So ideally the only categories I'd see on my drop down would be these 4, but I can try to clean these up at a later point. So with category weighting, I can have cells and tissues, and perhaps this is 25%, and I can add my next unit, which is fluids, and let's just say they're all 25. And this is how you would set up your category weighting in PT Pro under your traditional grades calculations. So here are my 4 units of study in Science 8, and I can save that. And you'll see for T2 that I have category weighting set to determine those grades. One thing that you can do is, you saw how quickly that was for me to do this manually. It didn't take too long. So if I wanted to do the same thing for term 3 and term 1, I could manually repeat the process. The other thing I could do is copy this configuration to the other terms to kind of speed it up. So what I will do is click on the gear icon, and I can copy traditional grades calculations. So what I want to do is I want to copy T2 within the same class. So I'm going to choose the first bullet, and I'm going to choose Science 8. And we just did term 2 category weighting, and I'm going to copy it over to term 1 and term 3. And It's just giving me a verification screen. So I'm just going to say yes to that. And you'll notice that T3 and T1 are now category weighting. And if I click on the edit button, you'll notice that T3 has the same configuration as what I had set up in term 2. And if I were to teach another section of Science 8, which I don't think I have, I could copy this configuration to another section. So I'd go from one class to another. So I could copy Science 8 and just, if I had another Science 8 class, I would just choose that section, and I could copy that configuration from section 81 into, if it was section 82 of Science 8 or whatever it may be. So hopefully the final grades setup is something you're familiar with the old gradebook, and that's how you achieve that in the Pro. But just put something in the chat if you do have any additional questions. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that, but I can point you to resources if this is something that is fairly new to you, where you can learn a lot more about the different types of categories for your grades calculations. So towards the end of the session, I'll show you where those additional resources are. So now that we've set up some categories, we've got some traditional weight configurations set for Science 8. Then we can look at our assignments that we have. I can go to my score sheet. So this is the view that you'd be accustomed to seeing in the old gradebook, where you have your reporting term. So we're in T3 right now. You see Science 8 is the class that we're with. And you can change your view. If you click on your name, you can go small to medium to large. So let me put it on large just for a bit. You see your class roster, and here are all the assignments along the top, and you see the different scores and flags and whatnot, and also comments as well. So the blue comment bubble means that there's a comment entered under this particular assignment. You will notice that the assignments are kind of cut off, but you'll know what the assignments represent most likely, as you would be the creator of them. But if you hover over the header, there is a pop-up box that will appear, so you can get a bit more information about that column. And then you can see the score here. So these grades here are based on the traditional grades calculations that I just finished setting up for Science 8, because it was total points in term 3, and it is now set to category weight. So most likely the points or the percentage changed slightly because of the method that I use to calculate them. Actually, come to think of it, actually they would be the same, because in my assignment list, all my assignments are all attached to the cell category. So it's once I start adding another category and add for a different unit of study, then we'll notice those other categories have a factor within that percentage grade calculation on my score sheet. If I wanted to create an assignment, you just click on the Create button, and you click on Assignment, and we can create our assignment here in PT Pro. And sometimes the first time that you launch this window, it takes a few seconds to open up. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go to my assignment list and just open up one of these. Oops, sorry about that. I meant to go to one of these existing assignments. So, so here's an assignment that I've already created. So just like categories, how you can assign it to multiple sections, you can do the same thing in Pro with an assessment. You'll see that this is just assigned just to Science 8, but if I had different sections of Science 8, I could assign it to those classes as well. So that's nice. With Pro, with Gradebook, you could not do that. So you're able to create an assignment once and link it to multiple classes. You give it a name, of course. Here's the category. And you will notice that the categories that I showed you before was a lengthy list. You know, this list is a bit smaller just because I can only see the categories that are aligned to Science 8. You know, these, like I said earlier, these categories, ideally I wouldn't have, yeah, I wouldn't be using at all, so I wouldn't see those, but I guess I didn't clean up my sandbox completely, but just assign my category, give it a score type. If it's points, collected only. Collected only is a new setting that you can use in Pro. So if it's something that you don't want to score, or if you're linking outcomes and you're using achievement levels, you can use collected only. In the old gradebook, you know, you kind of had to have a default value of 10 points or 0 or whatever, and it could be misleading when a parent saw an assignment that was marked that was scored on 10 but had no value because there was no value that was going to be applied to it. So this collected only works quite well because it doesn't allow the entry of numerical values. So that's where you'd use collected only. Some of these extra settings, you know, are similar to what's in Gradebook. Your due dates, you can put in a description for this assignment, just like we've seen on those other pages. You can add links as well. The other nice thing about Pro is the Students tab, which is new to Pro. By default, when you create an assignment, it applies to all students. But what you can do is you can assign it just to particular students in your class. So this is great for differentiated instruction, or if you have IPP classes and you're giving different types of assignments to different students in your class. Instead of having it apply to everyone, I can assign it to Ernesto and Patricia and John. And here on this page is where I can link my outcomes. You'll see that I've got a handful of outcomes linked. And I can just hit save and close. And yeah, since I'm removing students, it's just confirming with me that it's okay to remove and delete those scores for those students who previously had scores. So now you'll see for this assignment that I can only, I only see 3 students here because these are the only 3 students who are linked to this assignment. So even though I may have 20 some odd students in this class, because this assignment only applies to these 3, I can only assign scores to these 3 students. And you see that it's collected only, or no, I may have changed it to points. Yeah, I did change it to points. So the maximum entry for this assignment is 40 points. So I could put in scores of 35 and hit my down arrow on my keyboard and put in 30, hit in 40 and go through like that. When I'm entering scores, I can use the number pad on my laptop or on my keyboard, or I can use the score inspector here on the right hand side. So you have a couple different ways on your desktop machines or laptops to enter these scores. You can fill scores as well. If I were to clear these here.
Brian, Megan has a question here. Go ahead, Megan. Either type it in or.
Hi, Brian. I'll talk because it's too complicated to type it. What I found in working with the gradebook before, and I suspect it's the same with PowerTeacher Pro, is that if I have a particular category, and I'm a high school teacher, so I don't grade by strand necessarily.
Right.
But let's say I had, I wanted my tests to be worth, 25% of the student's grade. But when I put them in, based on their scores. So let's say I had a test that was at a 38, a test that was at a 40, and a test that was at a 90. It weighted each of those tests. So my test out of 90 was made up a bigger part of their grade than their test out of 30.
Right.
So what I had to do was to go back. I would enter it in as the, how many out of 30 or how many out of 90. But then I had to go back afterwards and change everything to a percent so that all of my tests were worth the same weight, if that's what I wanted. Otherwise, like I said, I might have a test that's out of more points, but if I want it to be contributing equally to the final grade,
yeah,
it has to be out of the same amount. So I can.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it totally skewed the grades, and it messed up the grades for my students in a big way.
Yeah. You could, I suppose you could change it to percentage and do it that way. Something else that you could do is play with the weight value, because certainly for secondary, knowing how the gradebook is calculating those grades becomes very important, because it's critical to understand what's happening behind the scenes. And like you said, Megan, if you have a test on 40 and a test on 50, and that's how you've entered it based on those points, the test on 50 is going to have a slightly higher weight. And maybe that's your intention, and if that's your intention as a teacher, that's fine. But if the test on 40 should be weighted the same as the test on 50, then that sounds like the dilemma you're in. So there's a couple different ways of approaching it. So I'm just going to open up this cells tissue. So one thing you can do is adjust the weights. So even though your raw score, or your point value on the assignment, it was scored out of 40, what I can do is I can change the perceived total value to be over 100. So you'll notice that instead of so what I've done is that there was no weight value initially. So let me remove the weight. So I've gone in this assignment. I clicked on edit. I click on the weight to expand this area, and by default, the weight values of all assignments are set to 1. So if I want this to have a perceived value of 100, I can still score everything out of 40 points, my 30s, 35s, and whatever else. But you'll notice that it has this weight factor applied, which is 2.5. So it gives it a perceived value of 100 points. So I'm going to save and close this. And what you'll notice here under this column, hopefully you can see this, under my score type, I've got this assignment that's scored out of 100, this scored out of 100, this scored out of 100. Now this test, even though it's scored out of 40, because I put in a 2.5 weight factor applied to it, gradebook is going to perceive it as being worth 100 points, even though when I go to my score sheet, the raw scores are entered out of 40. So so here you see here, this is right here. Hopefully you can see this. This student Ernesto has a 38 out of 40 times the 2.5. So it makes it seem like it's worth 100. But the nice thing about it is that in the portal, Ernesto's parents and Ernesto is going to see, the raw score, the 30 out of 40. You don't have to worry about it being converted to a percentage. So it's nice to be able to display it as this, because you may not in the portal want to display it over 100 points, because that's not how it was scored. But you can at least tell your gradebook how you want to score it. And you can also do the reverse as well. I mean, if this assignment based on 100 should really be 50 based on 50 points, reflective of everything else that I've done. Why I would score out of 100, I don't know why in the first place. But anyway, again, this is just a sandbox. You can put a 0.5, so I could have something scored on 20 or on 30, because it was just easier for me to score it on that amount of points, and I can use the weight to either increase the total value or to decrease the total value. So that's one way to kind of achieve that, I guess, in your gradebook. And then when you look at your assignment list, you can see all your assignments, and you see, okay, this is really 50 points. Famous scientist is 100. Characteristics of living things is 100. Obviously these would be little tasks which wouldn't really be worth 100 points in my judgment, but I guess for whatever reason I just scored it out of 100 for whatever reason. So when you're looking at all your assignments relative to each other, you want to make sure that the points, that they make sense, that something that covered very little outcomes doesn't have an overly disproportionate amount of weight compared to other assignments. Does that help?
Brian, Megan had put some stuff in the chat there. If you want to pop over and read there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And like I said, just for senior high, and I'm not super comfortable fiddling with the grades, so I just would make things in a particular category, like tests. Like I said, I'd make them all worth the same. And you could achieve the same by just entering everything as out of 100%.
Yeah.
But I always like to make the kids figure that out. But
right.
But when I put it in, I just assumed everything was worth 1, and then if something needed to be tweaked, that's when I changed the weight on it.
Yeah.
It just took out some of the calculating errors.
Yeah.
But if people don't know that point value changes the contribution to the grade, then they can make something that has a lot of point value, like if it's at a 90, worth a lot more than something at a 30, even though the 2 items might contribute equally to their grade.
Yeah, exactly. Because within these assignments, this is all focused on the same unit of study, all on cells. So I've types. I have a test, and I may have some assignments and projects and whatever else. So you want to, and I don't know how important it is at the end of the day to be able to say, I want this cell and tissues test to be worth 30% within this unit. But just as long as you can justify to say that this test, relative to the other assignments that I've covered in the same unit, the point value is representative and makes sense to me, that it's worth more than the other a task that I've assigned based on what was covered. This characteristics of living things, which is out of 100, just like you can do in gradebook. If I wanted to make this out of 10 points and hit save and close, I get prompted if I want to keep the scores or adjust the scores. So I'm going to, in this case, I'm going to adjust them because I could have 80s and 90s. Since I'm changing it from 100 to 10, I want to adjust those scores so that things aren't really out of whack. And this famous sign, if this was something that was, relative to my other assessments in here, was something out of 20, because perhaps there was some research involved, the presentation, whatnot, depending on the outcomes that I've covered. This may be something that looks a bit more accurate in terms of points being reflective based on what was covered. It's a little bit better, but maybe this test shouldn't be on 100, and maybe this first assignment should not be on 50, but I can play with those point values. But yeah, that's definitely something you definitely want to consider, because when those report cards go home, you want to ensure that those percentage grades, that how they're being generated, and that you can back up those grades and justify them. So it all really comes down to your categories, the point values, whether you're using weights, and certainly your traditional grades calculations. We're getting near the end, but I think we've covered. I know it's a quick fly through of these different pages, but if you're familiar with gradebook, hopefully you've seen that the skills are transferable. So what you know well in gradebook, it still applies in PowerTeacher Pro. I'll just point you here to some resources. Always visit the iNSchool website. We have user guides there, and I know user guides aren't always the best way to try to be informed, but we do have a ton of user guides on different features, whether it's just PowerTeacher itself, or I guess we still have the gradebook user guides, and we have PowerTeacher Pro. One of the things that I did develop for PowerTeacher Pro is an e-learning course. So on the iNSchool site, if you navigate to the teacher section, and we're in the process of updating the site, so it may look different in the fall, but this is how it's looked for a number of years. And on the main teacher page, there's some information here about PowerTeacher Pro, and you can click here to go to the e-learning course. So this is intended to be a more engaging and interactive way of self-directed PD, I guess. Some of the things that we've covered in the past hour, you'll find in different lessons here through the left-hand side. You'll see that there's 59 lessons in total, and it kind of goes through through migration, depending if you're migrating partway through the year, setting up Pro, just like some of the things that we quickly went through, like customizing class names, class descriptions, adding a link to a description. It's more interactive because you'll notice here that there's a video that you can watch that kind of, walks you through how to add a link to the description. So we don't need to hear my voice any longer than that. And there's other pages with display setups, and there's still text-based and images. And section 3 is working with categories and grade calculations. So this was the section that I was referring to. If you need to learn more about traditional grades calculations like total points, category weights, term weighting, this lesson here on the e-learning course, I guess it's lesson 12. Yeah, it's a fairly lengthy video. It's like a 20-minute video, but I've kind of earmarked where you can go to specific types of the grade calculations. And then there's another video here which kind of walks you through how you set it up in PowerTeacher Pro. And there's a quiz after many of the sections, just like a self-assessment. Section 4 is working with assignments, working with marks and grades. So some of these things that we've covered quickly here. One thing that we did not get to is analyzing progress. So this is in section 6 of the e-learning course. And we did not get a chance to talk about report cards, but if report cards are new to you, or if you need a refresher, or perhaps just want to go through how you complete report cards at the secondary level in PT Pro, section 9 will walk you right through that, about how you assign grades, entering strands for 7 and 8 ELA and math, completing the learner profile, and and some of these lessons are also interactive in the sense that they have these give it a try activities. So you don't even need a PowerTeacher Pro account to kind of go through a simulation. So these give it a tries, it tells you here the instructions. So this is going to walk us through entering a grade for the report card. So it says to click on grading and score sheet, grading and score sheet, change the reporting term from F1 to S1. So you just kind of go through the instructions, and then under the grade column, click in the cell next to Tammy Lincoln's name. So where is she? So right here. So you just kind of go through, and it kind of just simulates how you complete that task. So some of the lessons have these give it a tries, these kind of PT Pro simulations, but certainly visit the iNSchool site and the PT Pro e-learning course, because there are a lot of lessons there that you can go to if there are sections of today's session that I went through too quickly and you need to revisit. And there's also a search bar. So you can type in a keyword and you can find lessons. They have that, like, I just typed in try for the give it a try. So here's a give it a try activity there. I don't know if there's any final questions. I know we're 2 minutes beyond the 3:30 end time, so I'll just quickly say that I appreciate everyone's attention and attendance here for this session during your summer break. And yeah, I'm with the ECD, so if you do have any questions, you can certainly follow up with your administration, with your regional PowerSchool manager, but you can certainly reach out to me as well if you have any questions. I'm always happy to help.